This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome in, everybody, to the latest edition of Doc and Jock. Boy, do we got a lot to get to. From a quarterback making north of $50 million in Detroit. We're going to talk all about the big news surrounding the Detroit Lions, but we're going to start the podcast talking about some things that really involve bad luck, maybe misfortune, maybe the result of ineptitude finally culminating in what was really a sad event that was the NBA draft lottery. I tuned in. I don't know why I even did it. It was Mother's Day, I believe. It was 3 o'clock, and instead of hanging out with my mom and, telling her how great she is and what a wonderful mom she is, I went to the computer and sat through that half an hour of an abomination, knowing probably, like everybody else, that the Pistons were not going to win the lottery, especially knowing that this draft features players that nobody really likes and respects, and by all accounts is the worst collection of talent that has been out there in a long time. But you look at what happened, and again, it's become a yearly event with the Wings draft lottery and now the Pistons draft lottery, where it just kind of feels like a swift kick to the nards that no team ever, no NBA franchise in the history of Everdom has had the worst record a couple years in a row and fell from their spot to number 5. 3 straight years? It's crazy to think about, and that's where we're going to start today. We're going to welcome in my guy, Adam, the Jock Strozinski. Did you pay attention to this nonsense that was the NBA draft lottery, and how do you feel? Look, it's tough to talk about because it just makes you frown, it makes you frustrated. You bring no passion to talk about the Pistons, but again, you still feel like, man, NBA, throw the Pistons a bone. At least let them stay in the statistical spot that they were starting at number 3, but to fall to number 5 a couple years in a row, it's the first time in history. I don't think the system is rigged, but it kind of feels like the NBA draft lottery is antiquated, where 6 years, the team with the worst record has not secured the number 1 pick.
Yeah, and the crazy stat is 2 years in a row, the Detroit Pistons have had the worst overall record, and they've been in line to get the number 1 draft pick, and they both times have fallen to the 5th pick overall. That has never happened in history until it's happened to the Detroit Pistons twice. So this is just to have zero luck. I mean, let's be honest here. They have zero luck. I don't know why we do a draft lottery system. I just don't understand the purpose of it. I mean, if you look at the NFL is the most compelling league. They've got everything figured out. They're the most compelling league of all of the sports franchises. They do not do a draft lotto. They do not do any type of measures to prevent, and I'm going to use finger quotes here, tanking. Look, the NBA is just a weird league, right? It's one of the only leagues I can think of where players essentially play for half the time, because the other half of the time you're doing a thing called load management and you're resting guys. Or you'll have a team like the 76ers that are just bad for 10 straight years, just acquiring draft picks, only for the NBA to come around and say, hey, you can't keep doing this. This is wrong and this is illegal, and then penalize that team. The NBA, I think, just kind of fouls things up, and the NHL kind of follows closely behind. I mean, we can loop in some Red Wings talk with this topic, I guess, because we just had the Red Wings draft lotto as well. And look, these things tend to not favor either one of our teams here locally that have them. They don't favor the Red Wings. They don't favor the Pistons. Red Wings for years and years and years were kind of on the outside looking in. There was I think it wasn't, I'm trying to think of who it was. There was supposed to be a generational talent, and the Wings were like the worst team in the league, and couldn't even get close to sniffing the first overall draft pick. I think that year they ended up drafting 4th or 5th. So it happens in both the NHL and the NBA. I'm not sure why we have to go to these measures where you've got to use a draft lotto. To me, I just don't see the value or the point. I understand that you want to prevent the tanking. I understand that you want to try to keep everything as level as possible. That's what it's there for. It's to make sure teams do not take advantage of the system, and basically as the season starts to disintegrate, they just kind of pack up shop and they're basically rolling out G League players or guys that they sign on 10-day contracts. Well, here's the thing. If you look at what the Pistons did last year, that was how they formed their team to have enough guys to go out there and play. They signed guys from the G League and they signed guys to a lot of 10-day contracts last year. It is what it is. You know, you had a team, like I said, the 76ers, who took full advantage of the draft lotto, and they did it for multiple years in a row. They ended up getting in trouble. You can tell when a team is tanking. You can tell when a team is mailing it in, and you can go about executing or setting down parameters for a penalty to prevent that. I don't think you need to do the draft lotto anymore. I think you can just go ahead and just have your regular draft picks. I think what it also does is it kind of gives you a little bit of interest as you get towards the draft. You know, like if we knew the Pistons had secured the first overall pick, we would kind of shift our focus and we would start watching different players in the college game. We would shift our focus, start watching some different highlight videos of guys over in France, because there's a couple of them coming out this year. We would shift our focus to other things because we would know what we would be watching for. Instead, you have the draft lotto, and look, the Pistons season was over very early last year. We checked out pretty early. There was no reason for us to really check back in. And that being said, you got into the NCAA tournament. There were guys that we were watching. There were teams that we were watching, but we weren't fully invested. If we knew that there were a couple of guys that we should be keeping an eye out for because the Pistons might have the likelihood of drafting them, we probably would have been a little bit more dialed in. So I think it would just kind of fix some of the issues with the NBA, with the draft process for the NBA. It helped kind of spice up a little bit of the college game and maybe some of the international game if you just got away from the draft lotto, because I don't think it helps anything. Do you see a benefit at this stage of the game of keeping the draft lotto?
Yeah, it's great. It's because you don't want to encourage tanking. And to your point real fast, I think you're talking about the 2020 NHL draft where it was Alexis Lafreniere that went to the Rangers.
Yep, that was it. That was who I thought it was, but I wasn't 100% sure.
But not too bad. Lucas Raymond ended up being the pick for the Wings at number 4 from Sweden. So it went Lafreniere, it went Quentin Byfield, Tim Stützle from Germany went to Ottawa, and then the Wings got number 4. And look, here's the complicated part of this whole scenario that's challenging, is that you don't want to reward teams for tanking because it puts the losing signal out there. But at the same token, I think that what you can clearly see is that I think there has to be rules in place like, hey, you can't drop multiple years in a row. You can't, there should be no incentive to move up or anything like that, but there should be something in place where you can't move down because it's not fair. It's not a situation in which, losing and competitive balance makes the game of basketball something where it's tough to watch. It's tough to be able to sustain and be part of something. It's like there really is no hope for the Pistons. But largely, I think that what happened is, and I can agree, I think I'm doing it too, is that we're placing blame on a poor front office on an NBA draft lottery. It's like, look, if you're a decent evaluator, you can find talent. I mean, look, number 7, you just take somebody named Tyrese. You don't take Killian Hayes. Sets off your path when you miss on draft picks and you target players that can't shoot and you don't understand the philosophy. Clearly that's where, look, I think that, it gives you much more of an advantage if I think the one that stinks the most is, San Antonio getting the big, tall, generational talent. But, hey, that's just what happens. The Pistons got the number 1 seed. They got the number 1 pick, and they were easily going to select Cade Cunningham. But it's just unfortunate that there was no Wembanyama when it was the time for the Pistons to have the number 1 overall pick. But it's unfortunate. It's sad. I do think they need to have lotteries. I do think that you don't want to have a race to number one. It stinks, but I know football makes it so that there's an opportunity for teams to get better and get rewarded and trades and all that kind of stuff. But cause you got to be honest, is that the Pistons have been mostly to blame for their organization tanking. For now, you're hearing reports that the president of basketball operation, you're getting people to turn it down, and that's just unfortunate because and look at the other report. The guy that they want is like, I'll consider it from the Timberwolves, but I'm probably going to need you to scratch me a check for like $15 million a year. And I'm like, damn. I was laughing reading that. I'm like, that's probably what I would tell the Pistons too. I'm like, look, I'm not really interested, but if you scratch me a check for $20 million, I'll consider talking to you. And
well, I mean, think about that. Think about where that puts this team, right? In this organization. They are not valued anywhere in the league. They're a laughing stock right now. It's crazy. And you can't even acquire any draft capital that's worth a damn because this draft is kind of the shits.
Yeah, absolutely. And what the situation is that the power structure in the Pistons front office is led by Arm Tellem, and there should be more in detail reports on how this guy kind of weaseled his way into the organization and became the top dog and just runs the ship like a puppet master where he's hiring his own family, he's got his own scouts, got his own thing. He basically is the guy that's the headmaster even over Troy Weaver. It's just become a toxic environment, and really, as much as we're saying fire Troy Weaver, the same vitriol we should have toward the entire front office, the scouts, the entire system. It
needs an enema, dude. It needs an enema. It needs to be flushed.
Yes.
To me, it's absolutely crazy, right? A few weeks ago, there were reports that Troy Weaver's future with the Pistons was safe. He was going to maintain his job, and he was going to be able to continue to be the GM. But they're out there looking for a new president of basketball operations who will be making front office and executive decisions. I don't know how you can bring somebody in and then basically tie their hands and be like, well, he's got to be your GM. To me, it doesn't make any sense, which is why when they recant it, there was a report that came out this past weekend that basically said, no, whoever the new president of basketball operations is, he's going to be able to make a decision on Troy Weaver's future. Whomever you bring in, you need to empower them with everything. They need to be able to clean house, clean shop. Arn Tellem needs to go. All of his kids need to go. Troy Weaver needs to go. Honestly, if you could figure out a way to put Tom Gores in a box and ship him to Ibiza, I would do that because everybody needs to go. This organization is ran so poorly. And honestly, you look at it, top down, man, it is all bad. Look, I understand you can't get rid of Tom Gores, right? He's the owner. And the only way that he could go anywhere is if Adam Silver was to come in and be like, Tom, we're taking the organization away from you and we're going to force you to sell. The only time they do that, it's been unprecedented. The only time that they've ever done that is when the rest of the owners vote and they just basically have zero confidence in you as an owner. And they did that with David Sterling when he was making all of his racist remarks. So it doesn't happen often, and it doesn't really ever happen, nor I guess should it happen. But in this case, I wouldn't be upset if Adam Silver came in and was like, look, we're taking your organization from you. We are forcing you to sell. And then you need to just kind of gut this. But if you can't get rid of Troy or you can't get rid of Tom Gores, understand that. You need to bring somebody in who is seated right underneath Tom Gores and give that person all of the control. Let them be the president of basketball operations. Let them hire their general manager. Let them do their job to flush what we have now, because what we have now has been absolutely brutal. Arn Tellem does not deserve a role with this organization. None of his kids do. The people in the front office do not deserve their jobs. Troy Weaver needs to be fired. I don't know how successful he really could have been here. I know that he was the assistant general manager in OKC, and I know that he did some really good things there. It hasn't worked here. It hasn't. You don't get credit for taking Cade Cunningham at number one. Cade Cunningham was the consensus number one draft pick that year. You don't get credit for that. You haven't done anything. You look at the Killian Hayes draft pick. You realize when you let him go, when you waived him, nobody called him. My man's phone did not ring. He went straight back to France to probably play in some bootleg France league. Like, nobody wanted him. You screwed that up because there were guys in that draft that are all-stars right now. You've made multiple swings and misses for draft picks. And look, this is the other worst part. Even if you were to trade some of the guys that you have, right, you don't necessarily have any draft capital that you can really start to pair things to really help build out the future of this team, because you've given up so much just trying to move different players off this roster, trying to move different guys around. You've really hamstrung this organization, which makes it even harder to try to get somebody in here who wants to clean up this mess. It's really unfortunate.
What's going to be funny is when he looks to see if France calls him for the Olympics, and there's going to be like, they didn't call. What happened? They lose my number? And they're like, well, we don't think you're one of the top 12 people in the country, and we just think that you can continue to do whatever you got to do. And yeah, it just was unfortunate. And it's what's really unfortunate in the game of basketball is you see the Cavs, you see the Magic, you see the Heat, you see teams, you see the Rockets. They built better than you, and they get the number 3 pick, and it's like, oh my God. And we're racing to 20 wins. So that's where this is kind of falling off the rails here, is that the Pistons stink. They have stunk, and there's no hope unless they do hire the they do hire from an organization that is proven, that has, found talent and developed it. But to me, the first sign of whoever comes in is if it takes you more than 24 hours to fire Troy Weaver, it should be, okay, press conference, I'm the new president of basketball operations. The media is going to ask, okay, what do you think about Troy? He's like, I probably need to do some digging. Then 24 hours later, Troy's been fired. I mean, it's like, doesn't take that long to figure out, like, this is the talent. You got guys that can't shoot. It's like, we got a bunch of defenders and guys that don't fit. And they're like, who put this together? Okay. And then it'd be like, look, I need 2 things. Pay me some money and have Arm tell him, leave me alone, and we'll be successful. And that's all the Pistons need. But yeah, it starts with ownership, very poor. It starts with the top, with an owner that has no clue what he's doing, he hasn't hired the right people. And now you need to flush the system, and hopefully this president of basketball operations will be given some time and some real power to handle business. Before we start talking about the Lions, is there anybody at number 5 that can even be impactful? I think the consensus is Pistons fans that are paying attention, the hundreds that are still passionate and crazy about the Pistons, are saying, hey, trade this pick and figure out a way to get out of that spot, because there's nobody impactful at number 5.
Yeah, there's nobody in this draft that I'm necessarily hung up on. Nobody in this draft that I'm like, man, this person could do something great for this team. There's nothing that looks really great in this draft. That's why I think it's imperative that whomever they bring in as president of basketball operations has complete control. They've got to be able to go out and find the GM that they believe can help make the future bright for this team. Honestly, at 5, if you can find somebody to be your Huckleberry, yeah, trade out of it. If you could somehow get some future draft capital for next year, I would do that. Somehow add another first-round pick, add something to this team, because I don't like what's in this draft. I don't like what this team is basically made up of. I'm not even sure what position, if you were looking, you when you do basketball drafts, right? The majority of the talent is concentrated in the top 5. You might get a really deep draft where it's kind of top 10. After that, it's just kind of rolling the dice. There's nobody in this draft where I'm like, that guy could work out, right? And you would generally draft best player available. Even looking at positions of need for this team, right? Like looking to try to fill out a roster and make it a more complete team. I don't even know where you would go. I don't even know who the hell you would want, because I just do not feel that this is a very good or very deep draft. You've got teams talking about making plays for a guy like Bronny James. Bronny James didn't even score 5 points a game last year. The whole point of bringing Bronny James in would just be a bit of a joke to try to get LeBron here, so you could try to hit the free agency market to find guys who want to play with him at his age and him being on the downside of his career. I don't want that sideshow either. Like, I just don't. I kind of want what the Lions have. Like, let that sink in. This is where we're at in 2024. I want an organization to be ran like the Detroit Lions, whom we're going to talk about here very shortly. I want them to have a head coach and have a general manager who are of the same mindset, who have the same vision for building the team. I want the general manager to be able to do what the general manager feels is necessary to build this team, not just for right now, but for the future. I want what they have the ability to do, to go out, find players, bring players in, guys who most teams overlook, don't care about, gave up on, whatever. Bring them in, rehabilitate them, give them a chance to prove themselves. And then if they do stick around and they're worth a damn, give them a massive contract to build off and use them to propel the future. The Detroit Pistons aren't anywhere close to there. You've got a head coach where there are rumors about him being fired. You've got a general manager whose job is on the line. You've got a behind-the-scenes shadow puppet master controlling everything. And now you're talking about bringing in a guy for basketball operations who at one point wasn't going to be able to fire Troy Weaver, but now might be able to fire Troy Weaver. And the guys that you're interviewing for this position don't want to even pick up the phone unless you're going to offer them $15 million, or they're attached to other teams and you've got to offer them a first or a second round draft pick. It just, to me, it's insanity where the Pistons are. They are so far below trash right now. It is unreal. Imagine flying over a garbage dump and you've just got mounds and mounds and mounds of trash, and then you've got like this whole dugout, and this is where they're going to be pushing all of this dirt and all of this trash and all of these things into that hole to cover it up and bury it. You are all the way beneath that bottom layer of dirt that they're about to cover up with all of that trash and then pat it down. That's how low the Detroit Pistons have fallen. They're in dire straits. They have to figure this next pick, this next pick for a basketball operations. They've got to make it right. They've got to get it done, and that person's got to come in and clean house. It's sad.
Cuz, are you excited for Reed Shepherd, 6'3", from Kentucky? Average 12 points. Does that get you all up in a bunch, ready to get out there to LCA? No, all the picks, I'm looking at these names, and I'm like, might as well just throw it out there, pick Bronny James, and just for the name alone, just might get a couple hundred people more interested. And maybe the outside shot that LeBron will say, F it, I'll just go there to the Pistons to sell some tickets. But, woof, it's a rough lot. Alex Sarr's number one, and then the rest is just like, all right, bunch of guys that aren't going to have a lot of impact right away. It is a collection of draft talent that is going to take a little bit of time. And for the Pistons, real quick, do you entertain a realistic draft idea, notion of trading Cade Cunningham? Is it time?
You know, I go back and forth on whether you should trade Cade Cunningham or Jaden Ivey. I don't know. I think one of them has to go. I think when you look at the way this team is built, you look at your two strongest pieces, right? The guys who can probably get you the most, it's going to be one of those two players. I think at a certain point, you've got to make a hard decision, and you've got to move on from one of them, and you've got to reformulate how you need to build this team. Best case scenario, you could trade this fifth pick for a future first-round pick. Hopefully it could be for next year. Maybe it's a couple years down the line. Basketball's kind of weird with that. And then you trade either Cade Cunningham or you trade Ivy, and you get another first-round pick or you get another future first-round pick. And you're able to kind of pair some of those draft picks up with kind of hitting the restart button on this franchise. The problem is Cade's due for a contract very, very soon. And you're going to have to make a decision. You haven't really gotten the best out of him. A lot of time he's been injured with his here in Detroit, so you haven't really seen what his full potential is. The way the team is constructed around him's not good. He's not put in a position to really succeed. And he's had kind of a revolving door at head coach. So it's just been kind of a complete mess since he's come into the league and since he's come into this organization. So you've got to figure something out. Yeah, I would consider trading him. At this moment in time, a couple of reasons. He's your best guy. He could haul you the most, and you get out of having to make that decision on whether or not you extend him and give him that max contract. So it saves you money, helps reload some of your draft capital, and you get to hit the restart button on your roster. So, yeah, I would do it. It would suck, but I would do it.
Yeah, and pretty soon you might have a disgruntled Kate Cunningham coming in and saying, "Look, what are you guys doing? We have no hope. I can't come into the league and not win 100 games in 5 years." It's gonna be a wild situation with the Pistons. We laugh because we don't want to get too pissed and too upset with an organization that has no hope. But switching gears to a team that does have a lot of hope, a lot of positivity surrounding them, is the Detroit Lions. They recently completed rookie minicamp, and we got our first look. Really, not too much. Only an hour and a half of seeing, a practice that was not led by Dan Campbell, who was not there. We'll talk about that in a moment. But hey, you get a chance to see Terrion Arnold's got a king personality. He's very funny. He's very likable. A lot of confidence, a lot of ability. You saw out there. Got a chance to be out there and see kind of his fluid movement. But to me, which was crazy, were the tryout guys, the cornerbacks that tried out were 6'2" and 6'3", and I was just drawn to them, even though they had no chance of basically making the team. It was crazy to see. I was like, this is what I like. 6'3" corners. I was like, yes, this should be the requirement, but they don't grow on trees. So it was crazy to see, but it was fun to be out there, see some football. But again, it's the first day. Everything was super sloppy, and you just get a chance to lay eyes on these people and talk to them for the first time. I don't think it was a big deal that Dan Campbell wasn't there, especially knowing that the coaches are a bunch of former players. You had Aaron Glenn out there, Ben Johnson, Steve Hyden, the tight ends coach, Hank Fraley. They know the system back and forth. Scotty Montgomery was handling business too. So, look, I think that, it's always good to have the head coach there. But, hey, if there's a personal matter, we all are allowed. Could you imagine? I wonder, it is interesting. Like, does he call in? Does he just shoot Brad a text and say, hey, I got something going on? Or does he give him a call? It's always interesting to wonder, like, kind of the operations of those kind of things. And you look at it and you say, hey, as long as everything works out, the expectation is that Dan Campbell will be available for next week's organized team activities, where we'll get our first chance to see the rookies with the vets. I don't think it was a big deal, but it was notable that, wait a minute, it's a big deal when you're getting alerted that Dan Campbell is not going to be at a rookie minicamp practice.
Yeah, look, the only way I think this becomes a bigger deal or a major story or has any impact on the team is if it continues, right? If it becomes a thing. And right now, it doesn't seem like it's a thing. It doesn't seem like it's much to do about nothing. And you're right, with the way that this coaching staff is organized, you've got a ton of good intellectual head coaches or head coaching candidates on this roster. All of your assistant coaches and all of your positional coaches, all of these guys, like you said, either prior players or guys who are in line and were talked about last year to have coaching opportunities. They're all guys who are basically in line to basically move up the following year. You could see a world where both offensive, defensive coordinators go away. Positional coaches, whether it's a secondary coach, whether it's an offensive line coach or a defensive line coach, whether it's a wide receiver coach, you could see a world where all of those guys, where those positional coaches all move up to be coordinators, and then where you have assistants that move up to be positional coaches. So like this team, the way it's put together, the way the organization is constructed, it's all right if Dan Campbell's not there, as long as it's not going to interfere with what goes on in the future. That's the only way this becomes a bit of a big deal. It's the only way I think if you're a Lions fan, you should have any concerns. I think Dan Campbell does a really good job of putting this team first, taking care of his personal business and keeping the personal business and keeping the actual Lions business separated and kind of doing what he has to do to make this a winning team. When the season starts, Dan Campbell's all in. Even when the season's off, Dan Campbell's still all in. He's a guy who I don't think has that light switch. I think the light switch is always on. It's just stuck. So I think it'll be fine. I think you've got enough coaching aptitude with everybody that you have in the waiting in the wings to be able to organize what has to be organized. I think Dan Campbell and all of his coaches, whether it's Ben Johnson or Aaron Glenn, he communicates enough with those guys to where they know what has to happen on a day in, day out basis, even if Dan Campbell's not there with his 2 coffees. I think that they'll be fine. So I don't think it's a big deal at all.
Yeah. Now, here's the interesting part, too, with the Lions, is that this offseason is going to be about acclimating. It's going to be about, hey, competition at a lot of good spots. It's going to be about, hey, Can the cornerbacks that have been put together gel quickly enough? The offensive line stay healthy? Did they do enough at the wide receiver spot? So clearly, there's still some question marks heading into the season. But one of the biggest questions that was still lingering after the draft and after the extensions of Penei Sewell and Amon-Ra St. Brown was, hey, wait a minute, what about Jared Goff? And finally it broke. And luckily, it was a good situation in which a lot of us had prepared for it. It was a situation in which you knew, okay, by and large, when Brad Holmes comes out and says we're working hard on it, it means they're in talks. And it means that, okay, it might not get done quickly because of all the information, but hey, that they're talking about it and there's something in place or something being negotiated back and forth. And sometimes the final pieces of the puzzle take time, or maybe they were just waiting to see, hey, if Dak signs first or if Tua gets a deal, maybe you can say, okay, we're just going to wait. And Jared knows this. And it's like, hey, whenever they sign, you'll get more than that, which is interesting that Goff took the money now in that maybe he could have waited, but maybe they got the idea that maybe even Dak Prescott's not going to get a deal or Tua's not going to approach $50 million. So he took the money. Jared Goff got a contract extension, and it surprised me a little bit that it went to $53 million average annual salary. At the time we're talking, we don't know the exact details of the salary cap numbers, but he got a nice hefty $73 million bonus to sign his name. He's going to get $170 guaranteed, and in the end, the Detroit Lions have rewarded Jared Goff. And I racked my brain, and I'm very curious to get your sense of the whole thing. But in terms of trying to give opinions and things like that, basically, I'm not for it. And I guess I think that I haven't been doing a good job across the board of kind of thinking about it until I was driving. And I'm like, wait a minute. Why would I not want to reward a quarterback that did some things or put the quarterback that got you to the NFC Championship, that has been basically the leader of the ship, the captain? And so to me, I'm not mad at the framework of the contract because, okay, fine. Knowing what he has and the fact that he's going to work with Ben Johnson and Dan Campbell, what bothers me is I just think the quarterback market paying guys that have not won a Super Bowl north of $45 to $50 million is crazy. I'm mad at the market. I'm not mad at Jared Goff. He found his general manager that drafted him. Now he was challenged and had a rough situation. That 21 season was a pure test. Like, how are you going to handle it? We give you shit. What do you do with it? Be professional. And you grind even though you start struggling in 22 to lead the team to a bunch of wins in the second half of the year, and then you have the successful season. So he's going to get paid. There's no way that anybody in any scenario would have done anything different. I just think the marketplace, because to me, all this does is just gives me, I remember sitting here in this exact chair, having this exact same talk with you about Matthew Stafford. And do I feel better about Goff making double what Stafford made when I didn't think Stafford was ever going to win a Super Bowl in Detroit? No, I just feel kind of the same. I'm like, well, this just reminds me of the only thing different now is that Goff got the benefit of taking an organization that doesn't have success and basically worked the system, got two playoff wins 30 minutes away from the Super Bowl, and now he gets the benefit and gets a 4-year deal, $212 million, $170 guaranteed, 4 more years, and the opportunity is there for Jared Goff to even end his career if there's more success. So to me, I look at it like Brad Holmes followed the plan. I just think the quarterback market getting this high pretty soon, because we're not that old. In a couple years, does that mean above average quarterbacks are going to make 5-year deals worth $300 million? Those numbers are crazy. And I think that should be, I think those kind of numbers, I think the $50 million benchmark should be reserved for Super Bowl winners. That's my opinion. And I think that going from 27 to 41 would have not been treacherous. I mean, you want to make more than Daniel Jones, fine. But I'm mad at the market. This market is overblown. Mm-hmm. And look, they're going to finagle the number. It's not going to probably be prohibitive to the cap. They're going to make it so that, okay, look, they're going to pay a big chunk, but the cap is going up every single year. So it's not going to crush you in 2 or 3 years. And pretty soon, just like we said 4 or 5 years ago, Stafford's deal ended up going from tops to like 6th pretty quickly. And the same is going to happen here, where it's crazy to think about that $53 million is going to be considered a bargain. But It's why it's a proliferation of contracts in the NFL at that quarterback spot, which is so key. That bothers me. But good for Jared Goff, good for Brad Holmes. He got it out of the way. The big three were signed, and to me, fine. You put your nuts on the table. You got your guy. But I still, me personally, am skeptical that I'm going to see Jared Goff lead this team to a Super Bowl win. I think defenses can do some things at the most critical moments to make his life very difficult, and he doesn't have the one skill that I think is like a trump card in the new age of quarterbacks. So we'll see, and I would happy to be wrong. But I'm curious, what was your reaction? $53 million. Jared Goff is not a bridge. He is not the bridge quarterback. Jared Goff is now.
He is your franchise quarterback.
And he is, and probably will be, the highest ever paid Detroit Lion as we speak.
Yeah, look, I was shocked at the final number. Like, we all knew the contract was going to get done, but it being north of $50 million, when we talked about this months ago, I think we were both a little uneasy with it being $50 million. I think we were both incredibly happy, anywhere from 40 to 45, 47. I think at the upper echelon of what we were okay with, we were right around $48, $49 million. This contract's over $53 million a year. That's a lot of money. Now, the thing about it is you're rolling the dice as Brad Holmes. As the general manager, you're rolling the dice and you're saying, let's get this done now so we don't have to pay any escalating fees. Because like you said, it's the market. You're always trying to basically outdo whomever was done before. So you've got guys that are coming up this year, guys like Tua, guys like Dak, guys like Jordan Love. Those guys are all due for new contracts. Those guys are going to raise the bar that Jared Goff just raised. And then if you look at 2025, you got guys like Trevor Lawrence and you got guys like Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy, a guy who's already been to a Super Bowl. So those guys are going to have to get contracts done as well. So Brad Holmes is kind of playing the game. Let us get it done now. Let us pay him this. We know in due time, the market's going to tell you what it's going to be. It's going to be $55, $60 million. That's what it's going to be. So we're going to be on the low end. At some point, we are going to have the sixth highest paid quarterback in the next 2 years. Next 3 years, he'll probably be somewhere in the top 10. He'll be at the bottom part of that. And then as the contract moves on, obviously it starts to go lower and lower. The big concern, I think, if you're a Lions fan, is how does this impact the salary cap? How does this impact what we've got going on? So I did some math before the show. And if you're going by what the salary cap currently is, again, remember, we expect the salary cap to continue to grow. Every single year, the expectation is that the salary cap goes up. It's been forever and a day since the salary cap has either stayed or has gone backwards. So you're always putting your eggs in the basket of the salary cap going up. If the salary cap was to just stay the same over the course of this contract, you would look at his contract at $53 million a year. That's the high end, right? Remember, 170 of this was paid. 40 was like 42.5 or 43.5 was all wrapped up in guarantees. So it kind of offsets some of that distribution and how it hits your cap. If it was just the $53 million a year hitting the cap, you're looking at him taking up 20.75% of your cap. You can still operate in a world with that cap hit. It'll be okay. You can do different things with that. My big concern with this possibly being a bit of a bitter pill, being a bit of a ticking time bomb. We've seen this team invest in the quarterback. We've seen this team invest in the wide receiver. We've seen this team invest in the offensive line and the offensive linemen. We haven't seen this team invest in anybody on the defensive side. Who is that player? Who's that stud on the defense? I mean, for the length of this contract and for the length of the other two guys who I just mentioned, for the length of their contracts, are we just going to be kind of hitting the reload button every draft and just kind of cycling guys in and just kind of loading up on draft picks? At some point, you're going to have to pay Aiden Hutchinson, right? He's probably your biggest star on defense. You're going to have to give him a contract. You and I both, we really like Aleen McNeil. You're going to have to pay him at some point. Brian Branch seems like he's a foundational piece to this defense. You need to take care of him. You've got guys on this defense that are going to have to get taken care of. You've already shown that you'll take care of the offense. Will you be able to handle and take care of the defense and still be able to put a lethal team out there? My big concern is that they've invested so heavily on the offensive side of the ball. When it comes time to get the deals done for the defense, is there going to be enough money there? And is there going to be enough money to go around? And does this team have to worry about possibly going back, renegotiating contracts to try to free up different money to be able to give it to a guy like Aiden Hutchinson, to give it to a guy like Brian Branch, to give it to a guy like Aleem McNeil? Are you going to be able to, if you feel like Jack Campbell is your linebacker of the future, he's your Mike linebacker, are you going to have the money to re-sign him in a couple of years? I don't know. You just invested heavily this draft in your defense. You've got two young defensive guys, and one's going to be looking for a contract in 5 years. One's going to be looking for a contract in 4. Now, I know we can figure it all out in that time, but are you going to have the cash, and are you going to have the cash flow to constantly keep pushing and signing these guys that you want to bring back? Because, look, the organization has told you what we are interested in is finding guys, drafting guys, developing guys, and then re-signing guys. We don't necessarily want to go out onto the free agent market and bring guys in. We don't want to have to play that game and get into those bidding wars. We want to keep everybody in-house if we can. That's what they're looking to do. It becomes really, really difficult when you have a quarterback right now whose new contract could take up to over 20% of your cap. You have a wide receiver whose contract could take up to, I'd have to do the math, but it's going to be anywhere between 12 to 15% of the cap. You've got an offensive lineman whose contract's going to take up anywhere from 10 to 15% of the cap. So it becomes hard when you start divvying up this pie and giving everybody all their money to have that money on the back end to be able to give it to other guys. Now, like I said, you're always counting on the cap going up. So you're always counting on getting money on the back end, but it just becomes difficult. I think at this moment in time, Lions are playing a little bit of a dangerous game. Do I think Jared Goff is worth it? I think with the way the quarterback market inflates every single year and the way the quarterback market inflates with every single signing, I think, yes, Jared Goff is worth this contract. Jared Goff just won you 2 playoff games. He had you 30 minutes away from a Super Bowl. He didn't lose you that Super Bowl. A lot of things went wrong and didn't get you to that game, okay? But I think what this tells you right now, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how Jared Goff plays underneath this pressure, because now it's different, right? It's not just get us there. Now you got to go out there and you have to get us to the Super Bowl, and you got to win the Super Bowl. That's what they're paying you to do now. It is no longer just go win a playoff game. It's go win the Super Bowl. It's a completely different set of pressures. It's a completely different set of rules that you are now going to be playing by and be held to. You got to go out there and you have to perform, and you're going to have to do it underneath the weight of that contract. That's a big contract. So it'll be interesting to see how he performs over the next couple of years.
Yeah, expectations have risen. And that's what stinks, is that he's a tweener. Like, I feel like what he is what he is. Like, do you see, like, is there an avenue where you could say to me, well, his game can get better, he can evolve, he can become a little bit even better against the pressure, against the great defensive teams? Because it only gets tougher the further you get into the postseason. And Eric Kramer came on the podcast and he said, look, Jared Goff was part of the reason why the Rams lost the Super Bowl. He didn't perform at a high level, only scored 3 points. And look, he didn't play all that bad against the 49ers, but there was an issue in the third quarter all year, and the Lions never got it right. And I just think that, to me, I look at it like Jared Goff is a quarterback currently, because that's what we've seen, and it's the facts. He's a quarterback that can win you playoff games, get you to the Super Bowl. But can he put a team on his back and shine in the Super Bowl? I think he can. He can do it. It's not out of the realm of possibility, but it's going to take, like it does take a lot of other NFL teams, a lot of luck. But you know what's encouraging is with Stafford, it just kind of, after 12 years, we knew it. We weren't rude. We started assessing it after years 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Like, all right, this is going to go nowhere. We're only in now 21, 22, 23. This is now going to be his 4th season in Detroit. So he's going to have a couple more shots at it. So I'm skeptical that he's going to ever deliver that. But look, if there's a scenario, if there's a recipe to do it, it's this, where you have a general manager that knows you, that knows your skills, knows you front and back, sideways, knows everything that you're about, pieces you together with a coordinator that is on Goff's level in terms of intelligence. And because I don't know if you've seen it, go to Dan Orlovsky's and Chase Daniels' Twitter page. At some point last week, they each pulled out a offensive playbook from their time with teams from like 2008 and 9. And the level, and they go through it a little bit and talk about motion, shifts, calls, positions, downs, and they go through exactly what that looks like. And I was just fascinated by those videos because of just how much info a quarterback has to know. That's just the foundation. And then there's installs where they take what you're supposed to know and then adapt and go off of that for plays for the week. And so this, yes, quarterbacks deserve to be paid at a high level, but not $50 million. I just think that there should be some, hopefully, correction of this market because you can't sustain it. That's why a lot of these teams are unsuccessful. But the recipe's there where Jared Goff is smart, Ben Johnson's smart. They have the weapons. We still haven't tapped into Jamison Williams. You have the tight end. That's a superstar. You got 2 running backs. The offensive line is going to be a question, because they're older. They got to stay healthy, and that's been tough. So that's where this collapses, is that you got 3 linemen in their 30s, and it's not young anymore. And Frank Ragnow is an outlier. Frank Ragnow is a question mark right now in that can he stay healthy for the whole time? Because if you don't protect Jared Goff, you got no chance. No chance in hell to get it done. But I think there's a chance. I think that the Lions today, as we are now in the mid-500s of this podcast, 11 years in, are probably the closest that they will ever be to being Super Bowl winners. And Brad Holmes, I think, is going to deliver something special this year because they've circled New Orleans as a marquee Super Bowl for Dan Campbell, Aaron Glenn, Alex Anzalone. There's some intrinsic motivation here to get to the Superdome to play in the Super Bowl. And I think this, to me, it's 24, or you might start having to retool the complete offensive line. You might got to do a little bit more along the defensive line. So to me, it's 24, and this is the year. I think everybody knows it intrinsically that this is the year to do it. And then Jared Goff can play quarterback for the next 12, 13 years. He can do whatever he wants. So I think, look, it's a situation in which there really is no right or wrong in this scenario. Brad Holmes was going to pay. The fans are happy. Jared Goff chants at Tigers games still going on. And I appreciate the fans showing appreciation to a guy that brought you something you didn't have. But at the same token, the fans will get on Jared Goff if he doesn't get to the highest level, if he throws interceptions at bad moments, if he fumbles, if he goes on a cold streak at the worst possible time. So to me, I have always remained steadfast in my belief that payments of that magnitude to be the number 2 ranked quarterback should follow Super Bowl wins. And that's how I've always believed it. And I'm right at the same token to be skeptical that, hey, can this guy do it? Go out there and prove it. It's no big deal to say, hey, I have doubts that, hey, I think that defenses can get to him. There's nothing wrong with saying that. And I think the debates have been real. Fans have said, wait a minute, there is the other side of it, cuz it would have been tough because it would have cost more, but Brad Holmes didn't have to do jack. He could have let Jared Goff ride his $30 million contract this year. You still would have had $25 million on the books. You could have done nothing. And then if you like him, you franchise him again, and he would have cost $30 million against the books next year. But I think the numbers work out where the numbers will be lower with a new deal. But you could have just said, okay, you play out your contract, we like it, you win a Super Bowl, you get, hey, that's the ultimate test. Not get to the NFC Championship game, but to win the Super Bowl. Then, hey, maybe you get $60 million. Hey, okay, you're 30 years old, you'll get a 10-year deal, $600 million, which would be 3 times what he would have made. So there are other angles to this that you can look at outside of just being universally supportive of the Lions. It's a good situation for everybody involved. Goff's going to be comfortable. $73 million to sign, $170 guaranteed. He's taken care of. He knows, look, Brad Holmes found his quarterback. He's hitched his wagon to Jared Goff. And next week, and so we'll also now look at the ancillary stuff and like, hey, wait a minute. Okay, if Jared Goff was given a test and you expected him to prove it, why did you draft a quarterback in Hendon Hooker? Why did you draft two guys in Manu and Broderick Martin that are...
See, that's my big question,
Yes.
right? You just spent all this money and
Yes.
you're in go all in mode, and you've basically mortgaged parts of your future with some of those middle draft picks that you have. You've gone after guys like Hendon Hooker, an offensive lineman that nobody really knows anything about. You've got a defensive lineman that you drafted who's not been able to contribute at all. There were other guys out there who probably could have made more of an immediate impact. You could have did different things to set yourself up better for the future. And instead, you've got these really developmental pieces who really haven't shown a lot. Now, I know some of those guys were brought in this year, but it just kind of makes you scratch your head like, what the hell did you guys do at the draft? What were you thinking?
Yeah, it's going to be fun to see. Real quick, I'll say this: good for Spencer Torkelson to rebound, kind of get a couple homers. It's good for the Tigers.
See, all we got to do is call him out. We call him out. Next thing you know, he starts swinging and stroking.
Boom! That's how you got to do it. Tigers, 500 team, still what they're doing. They should be able to have a good series against the Marlins, who are a bad team. So I'm curious to see now next week too. Real fast before we get out of here. Any primetime game you're clamoring for on the schedule? Anything you want to definitely see to open the season for the Lions? The schedule is good. I'm not into it as much as people are online. Man, you guys are hungry for the schedule. I'm cool with it. I want to know who plays when, where. Curious to me, it's Houston. I want to know the Cowboys, who plays on Thanksgiving, who's the opener, how many night games there are. For you, any marquee game that you're definitely circling, and who do you want the Lions to start the season against?
I would love to see them take on the 49ers right out the gate.
Yeah.
Just to get a little bit of revenge. You could play that game on Sunday Night Football. I think it would be fantastic. I mean, it would be appointment viewing. Other than that, man, I know they got a game against the Bills. That would be interesting. I would love for that game too. We already had them on Thanksgiving, so maybe not there. But that'd be probably a pretty cool Monday night game. I don't know if you've ever had any experience with Bills fans. Bills fans are fantastic.
Yeah.
I love Bills Mafia. I think they are great. If you could have the Bills come, I don't know if they're playing at home or not, but if the Bills could come here, oh man, it'd be fantastic. Because Bills fans are really and truly, they are a delight. I think they're fantastic people. So I would love for that. I think that'd be great. You get that Rams game later in the year on a Saturday, that'd be fine. But other than that, man, I mean, it's weird because you start hearing leaks and you start getting stuff, and when we're recording right now, we don't have any real information on who's playing when and who's doing what. But it'll be interesting to see kind of what the schedule looks like.
Yep, they locked it down. I think probably they realized, hey, wait a minute, we were so free with this information that people were spending time trying to find it. So it probably will be a lot more leaks probably the day of the release. All right, before we get out of here, make sure you follow Adam on Twitter at AdamRSTROZ. Is Rory the favorite to win the PGA, or is it Scheffler? Who would you throw some imaginary bucks on this week? Rory coming off a divorce, kind of similar to what he did 10 years ago when he broke up with Wozniak, got that flow, and now he comes in as a winner. It's just hard because he hasn't been a major winner in a decade. I kind of see, obviously, Scheffler. I like kind of the guys on the fringe. I like the Schauffele's. I like the Colin Morikawas of the world. I think Thomas and Jordan Spieth have kind of dipped, so I can't put them as major winners. But I can't wait. I'm going to put some time in this weekend and watch some of the PGA at Valhalla in Kentucky.
So I hate Rory. I can't stand him. I'm watching Full Swing currently on Netflix.
Yep.
And I'm hoping that it helps change my mind, because I had a really bitter taste in my mouth after everything happened with the PGA and Live and how they merged. I just kind of felt like Rory knew more than what Rory let on, and I felt like Rory was in a position where he really could have threw the commissioner underneath the bus and really backed it up on him for being a dirtbag, but he didn't. He kind of shielded him and protected him. So I'm hoping as I make my way through Full Swing, my opinion on Rory changes, but I'm just hoping he goes down like a flaming bag of shit. Honestly, right now, some of my favorite golfers. I've always been a Ricky Fowler fan. So if Ricky's in it and he's got a chance to win anything, I'm always pulling for him. He's usually my number one guy. I like Spieth. Justin Thomas I like as well. So we'll see what happens, man. I am always wishing for bad things for Rory, though.
PGA Championship, can't wait. Great
dude, I
episode.
can't stand that guy.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh man, let's see. Now I'm going to be watching it with a whole new flair because I like Rory. I mean, I like
A lot of people do. I just despise him right now.
You're just a big hater. You're just a big fat hater. That's how it goes. Hey,
I'm a shithead, bro. I can't help.
make sure you guys subscribe to the podcast. We enjoy it. We've been going strong since 2013, and we've been able to continue the streak here, consecutive weeks, and some great stuff's happening to the network for Adam personally, and we can't wait to share it when all the news breaks. It's going to be a good time. Hit that like and subscribe button, 3 words, Detroit Sports Podcast, and our content will find you. And please leave a review. Let us know what you like or dislike. And please feel free. Any of the questions that we ask, make sure you follow us on Twitter at Detroit Podcast. Answer the questions. Thank you. We enjoy the engagement with the Detroit sports community. For the Jock, Adam Straczynski, I am the Doc, John Macaroon. Can't wait for next week where we fire it up again. Turn on the mics. Turn on the lights. Fire it up for the next episode of Doc and Jock.
You fucking podcasters. I said don't let them in here.